Today is Sunday, August 4th, 2019, and this is Celtics Beat here on CLNS Media, the leading online provider of audio-video coverage of your Boston Celtics. Evan Valenti once again filling in for Adam Kaufman here on this Sunday. Today's show, episode 326, featuring NBC Sports Boston's Chris Forsberg. It's brought to you by betonline.ag. Go to clnsmedia.com/CelticsBeat and use the promo code CLNS50, that's 50, for a 50% bonus on your first deposit of $25 or more. Welcome inside another edition of Celtics Beat here on CLNS Media. Evan Valenti with you, filling in for Adam Kaufman. Adam taking the week off, having a little surgery. It's Adam. We'll be back. Yes, Chris. He's having a little surgery. He'll be back fairly soon. He could be back next week. You might hear from me next week. I might get another week off just to recuperate and then come back the week after that. But filling in here, make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, all that fun stuff. But and normally this is a time where we do this thing where we do a little monologue and we get clips from all over the place and we play them. I just think the guest is too good to do that, so we're just going to bring in Chris Forsberg from NBC Sports Boston right away here. Chris, how you digging the new digs, buddy? You go from ESPN Boston, you land at NBC. How are things? Life good?
Yeah, it's been great. It's it's so funny to me that ESPN is such a big company, and but sometimes I'd go out and I don't know. It's just no one knew who I was, and now the power of NBC Sports Boston. I always joke with people there's got to be something better on to watch, but people watch and they like our shows, and that's pretty neat. And so to everyone who comes up and says hello, it makes my day. And my kids always get a kick out of it, and they don't understand why people are interested in it, but they think it's funny.
I'll tell you what helps, and it's funny because it's actually I think just a Boston sports person thing, and maybe I think it's a younger Boston sports person thing, the hair game amongst a bunch of Boston, between you, Jay King obviously has been going through different stages of it, but has always had great hair. DJ Bean's another one of these guys who has terrific hair. I mean, there's just so many of you. It's so distinct. You have your own little niche with whatever you got going on top of your head there, buddy. I think it's just because you're so presentable on camera. Maybe it's a timeless thing, because you go back to Shaughnessy. Shaughnessy has always had that curly red hair, has always been sort of his trademark. Maybe it's just a stigma of Boston sports guys. You just got to have the hair to hang with the crew, and I think it helps. But it definitely plays up on TV. You definitely look like you belong on TV. And I think you found a natural home, my friend. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'm glad you're more behind the camera because I think you have a great enthusiasm for television that you don't always get in print media, man. I would read your stuff on ESPN, and I've talked before. I know your personality. I think you have a great personality, but you never unless the Celtics made the Eastern Conference Finals or the NBA Finals, where you're doing a minute 30 hit on SportsCenter, you never really saw you.
Yeah, it's tough. And listen, I get it. We're covering a million different sports, and here you just have more time and more ability to really I used to get really nervous before SportsCenter hits because you only got a minute and you got maybe two questions and you got to be good with it. And here you can just sort of ease yourself in. You're gonna get a 5-minute block. You can be funny. You can so I don't know. It's a balance. You definitely want to be informative and all that. But I appreciate that. It's I didn't know how this was going to go or how I was going to do with more TV time. And it's just I still get a kick out of it. And if I ever lose my hair, I'm screwed.
Yeah. I think you're good. I think you're good for now, my man. In terms of because NBC Sports does a great job with content, and just level with me here. Be honest with me. Are you more from a content standpoint? Are you and your producers at NBC Sports Boston? Are you guys more upset over the loss? And this is just a pure content thing. Of Kyrie Irving or Gershon Yabusele? Because you can make so much content out of both of those guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So Kyrie was great because everything he said was a story. And yet my hardest thing with Kyrie was that no matter if you had a really good story to tell, you just couldn't get the one-on-one time or, really kind of open that shell to find out more and make it a great story. So that was frustrating in some regards. And I mean, I've got stories that that I'm like mad that I didn't get to the finish line on. There's one about like untucked Kyrie that might, I don't know when or where or how, but maybe down the road that will come back up. But we put a lot of work and effort into this fun piece about, how Kyrie's better with his jersey untucked and all his teammates kind of believing in the legend. And but I never got Kyrie to talk about it. And it's just, that's the difficulty there. And but again, like, he was mesmerizing to watch. I will miss that aspect of him. I do think, it's a balance between how much he got blamed for their struggles and what he deserved blame for. And so that was a balance. But yeah, Gershon, given the amount of time we spend on Weird Celtics Twitter and such, that's a huge loss, quite literally.
And like, so one of the things I love, like, because people that don't know, like, I wear a lot of hats. I also have like a radio show. I do a morning show Monday through Friday from 5 to 9 in the morning. And one of the things I love, like, you made it when people provide your content for you. Like, as an example, Old Takes Exposed has it made, right? He doesn't have to do it, or he or she, whoever runs the account, doesn't have to do anything anymore. People just tag him or her in the thing, and they just retweet it, and all of a sudden there's the content. Like, you don't have to do anything anymore. Weird Celtics Twitter, like, has been creating content for you guys for, like, 2 years here. Like, it must be, like, the golden age of being a producer for you guys right now. And, like, now that I'll even throw this out there. Weird Celtics Twitter just went mainstream. We were on the jump, baby. Like, we've gone big time at this point. Like, life is good for Weird Celtics Twitter right now.
Yeah, like I was sort of jealous. Like the last summer I got to do the jump, and if I brought up Weird Celtics Twitter, people would have kicked me off the show. And this year it's there they are, showing all the memes and asking Marcus Smart about it. It's good. Like, listen, it's true. In a season that was maddening for anyone who watched or anyone who was involved in any shape or form, Weird Celtics Twitter provided a nice little relief, and it's just so funny to see it go mainstream. I don't know, like they might have to go back underground a little bit to get their street cred back up, but they're not going to stop posting.
Yeah, no, there's no way. I know the Riffs man is like thrilled about the development here because he's just like the fact that he's posted Grant Williams and Robert Williams into existence basically for Danny to draft has been just unbelievable luck sent his way. Love the Riffs man. He's one of my favorite dudes. Last part of this just silliness here at the beginning in terms of creating content, where it's like all this stuff. Are you more excited then for creating content, like in terms of just a content creation? Are you more excited for Taco Fall or Enes Kanter? Because both those guys are gold.
So I selfishly, and I'm fascinated by how much interest there has been in Taco, really since Summer League, and it just mesmerizes me how popular he is. I posted something the other day, like, if you go to Google and you do Celtics roster, the first player suggestion is Taco Fall. Now, I know some of it's SEO related, and that means that a lot of people are searching for him and all that, but more people are now searching for Taco Fall than are searching for Kemba Walker. And I mean, that's mind-numbing to me, but he is fascinating. I was on a golf course a couple weeks ago, and we get to like the third tee, and a guy who I wasn't very familiar with, like, kind of comes up next to me and goes, so, hey, I hear you write about the Celtics. I got to ask you about something. I'm sort of bracing myself for a question about Kyrie. And he goes, this Taco Fall guy going to make the roster? And it's just so universal. Like, everyone knows who Taco Fall is, and they're rooting for him. And even though they don't know nothing more than he's 7'7", it's a high interest story.
Yeah, but like on the flip side of that, like Enes Kanter just made like a 2-minute long like hype trailer with DDP for some wrestling thing he's doing, and I as a producer here for CLNS, I help out Adam, but I also help out Jeff Goodman, and we interviewed Kanter, I think when he was on the Knicks, and I gotta tell you, the guy is like Kyrie's a great interview only because he's just gonna say stuff. Like Kanter, there's nothing off limits with him. Like, you're going to love him just from an interview standpoint. Nothing is off limits. He will give you quotes and everything. And as an actual journalist, like, trying to write stuff, he's going to be so helpful for you guys. Like, the 40 minutes we had with him, you had the interview stuff where you're like, hey, like, what are you comfortable with? Like, we go here, can we go here, we go here, and literally everything, because we want to talk about his relationship with his country. He's
right.
everything is on the table. I don't care what it is. I don't care what you ask me. Like, I'm game. And for a journalist, and I know for Jeff was like, oh, this is going to be great. It was awesome. It was one of the best pods we've ever done. I mean, we've done some fun stuff. We had Jerry Ferrara from Entourage on. We've had Pat Connaughton on. We've had TJ McConnell on. But I think Enes Kanter, out of everybody, has been like my favorite one, just because of how candid he is and how unafraid of just being interviewed by anybody. And like, as a content creator, quote unquote, it's going to be gold for you guys. Trust me, you're going to love having Enes Kanter. I do
want to say, as a wrestling nut,
yes,
I am excited for his I've been more fascinated by his videos, trying to pick out his outfit for his WWE appearance and all that, and working with Diamond Dallas Page. That alone might get me through a season.
Yeah, I mean, I need more videos with him and DDP for sure. I mean, like, you go back to my heyday, my heydays of wrestling. DDP was right up there with like Sting as like two of my favorite guys of WCW. And then the flip side, like WWF, like Shawn Michaels is always my guy. Steve Austin obviously was everybody's. Like The Rock. I remember when The Rock was like Rocky Johnson. I don't even think he was The Rock at one point. He was not. He was like, he had two names.
Rocky Maivia.
That's it. There we go. He was. Yeah. I remember he had he had like no street cred at all. And then all of a sudden he became The Rock, and all of a sudden he was the coolest guy on the planet. And he went heel like 16 times and then came back and was the coolest guy. Kurt Angle, like, just absolute classic battles with The Rock and Kurt Angle. When Triple H was actually Hunter Hearst Helmsley before he was Triple H, like, I like when The Undertaker wore purple gloves and wasn't driving a motorcycle down the ramp. Like, I'm back. I go back a little bit, not totally all the way back, but like Psycho Sid was one of my favorites. Like Vader, I'm in. I'm like early '90s, mid '90s wrestling for sure. And having DDP.
If you want to just ditch this Celtics talk and do like an hour on like late '80s, early '90s WWF, I'm in. The Monday Night Wars, like I can go all day.
That theme song from Monday Night Raw used to be like just what would get me going. Like, I would get so jacked up. I used to go to like some like I've been to Raw a couple times, been to SmackDown a couple times. I went to No Mercy one time because we have the Times Union Center over here. I live in the Berkshires, but we live over in Albany. Just to hop over the mountain and you go and watch some wrestling live. It was awesome. But to spare everybody from the wrestling conversation, we should move on to more serious stuff. And look, just to point this out, like, folks, this is the deadest time of dead times for the NBA calendar. Like, this is brutal. And right now, we can't even use football to get us through because we're in football training camp. So just bear with me here. But there's actual stuff to talk about because Marcus Smart went on the jump the other day with Rachel Nichols and with Kevin Arnovitz and with Dave McMenamin and had a great segment. And he ended up, saying some things. And I thought it was interesting to me, Chris, that Marcus Smart's the guy that ends up on this show because I've said it for a while about Marcus. I think his voice, and it has been this way, I think, maybe not since he was drafted, but very shortly after. I think his voice actually carries a lot in that locker room. And right now, you look at their roster, he's the elder statesman of everybody in that locker room. He's been on the team the longest. It reminds me of like Avery Bradley being the guy that's been on the team the longest. I gotta think here, just in this performance kind of like highlights this maybe a little bit more. And maybe I'm the only person thinking this, but you gotta think that he has probably the biggest leadership role on the team right now, or has one of the biggest. Am I wrong about that?
No. What's always fascinating to me is that he's still only 25. Like, we've been doing NBC Sports Boston does these 20 under 25 or 25 under 25, and it feels like he's been on the list for 8 years. And I think he's got a chance to make it like one more year this year. And I don't know when his birthday is, maybe October or November. It's fascinating. He's still very young, but yet clearly commands respect based on the way he plays, with the passion that he plays with. And I can absolutely see him being sort of the leader, at least maybe the vocal leader of this team this year. Certainly Kemba comes in and as the superstar has sort of that leadership pull. And it'll be interesting to see how his style meshes and sort of we'll sit here and overanalyze how he leads versus how Kyrie led. But I think both, really everyone that's been here, that part of this core, I think from Marcus to even Jason Tatum said the other day, he wants to be more vocal of a leader. I think all those guys, based on having been here, based on the success they had in 2018, I think they'll all have a little play in it. But certainly when Marcus sort of stands up and says it carries extra weight. I think back to last year, they had that bad road trip out west. He's the guy that stands up in the locker room in Portland, sort of challenges everybody. He's not afraid to call out guys and sort of like tell people that, you're not playing the right way, or, this isn't going right. And so I think that's going to be quite important to this year's team. And I do think Marcus goes about it the right way too. I don't think he'll tell the team is playing bad. I can't ever remember him saying it's player XYZ or it's the young guys or this guy. He leads the way you want to.
Yeah, and you're right. He never, like, even on that segment, The Jump, he always mentions, like, yeah, Kyrie screwed up or Kyrie didn't play as well as he wanted to. But, like, let's be honest, there are 4 other guys on the floor plus the head coach. Like, none of us did we want to do. Like, when there's times you could signal somebody, you could just pull somebody out and be like, this guy stinks. He never did that. He never fell for that. And he's always a guy that kind of, like, holds himself accountable to everybody else, which I really like. And he mentioned that, like, in the interview, and I wrote this out as a quote, like, guys calling guys out was a quote of his, of guys calling each other out in the locker room. And it's interesting, like, for those of you that have never covered a game or understand or listen to somebody that covers the game, there's 2 times you have with the team in the locker room, quote unquote, right? There's pregame where, guys are getting ready, they're, stretching, they're eating, they come in, they get undressed and all that stuff. And if they want to talk with you, like, they will talk with you. But otherwise, like, that's not what this is for. Like, unless, you have talked to Jeff and worked something out where you're talking to somebody pregame to get a couple of quotes for a story, like, that's fine. But normally guys aren't talking to you pregame. It's usually postgame, and it's usually like a select group of guys. It's not everybody. It's like 2 or 3 guys after the game, maybe even just 1 guy after the game who's given, like, you can actually interview. You don't have the ability to talk to everybody, but you're in the locker room every single day. You're talking to guys throughout the entire season. And did it ever get a point in the locker room, at least that you noticed, where things get a little tense? Guys might be not directly calling people out, but, like, maybe, the chemistry's a little bit off, and there's, maybe tension's a little bit tight in the locker room. Did it ever get to that point inside? Because, like, we're months removed now, but we're still searching for answers, I feel like, Chris.
Yeah, I think I go back and especially in this quiet time, I've been sort of searching for, should we have known earlier that, Kyrie was growing disenchanted, and should we have seen the cracks before? Like, certainly by February, it wasn't even necessarily in the locker room. I think back to the shoot around in New York where he said the whole ask me July 1st thing, and, there was tension there. But like Marcus Morris, he said in March that they weren't having fun. Kyrie sort of hinted at the same thing in as early as November. And I think that really was just a product of, there was such high expectations that when these guys fell so woefully short at the start of the year, they got so frustrated they never quite got out of their own heads. And so I do believe Marcus when he says that, in general, like, they liked each other, that they hung out together, that there wasn't like the locker room dissension that they walk in there and it's like, oh, I hate these guys. They just hated the way they played together, and they could never get past their own individual agendas to figure that out, or at least not long stretches of it. I mean, heck, in the playoffs, they won 4 or 5 in a row, and then, it all came unraveled. So, you could see guys had their moments. I mean, Shemi Ojale went off at one point, and, like, he's the last guy you would expect to be boiling, but, like, there was a point in the year where he sat there and unloaded on this roster. And now think about that. That's like the 12th man on the roster. He's just working his butt off trying to get out there, but even he's sitting there going, we got all this talent. I can't even get on the floor. And these guys can't figure it out. And to me, that just sort of summed up everything with this team. There was so much talent, so much potential. They never came close to maximizing it. And each guy had their individual frustrations at some point. And I don't know, it just sort of hovered over that team the whole year, where it was always like that locker room just, again, I didn't walk in there and go, oh, these guys are mad at each other, they hate each other. But it was like these guys are just so frustrated that they can't figure it out. And there's a lot of finger pointing, and they never quite went around about it the right way.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think the last guy you want to piss off is Shemi Ojale, just because, like, that guy's ginormous, and has the body of somebody he's like, what, 23, 24, and he has the body of like a 29-year-old. Like, that's just, that's the last guy I want to make mad. Because, like, there was the running joke of him, like, throwing the medicine ball into the wall, and you could, feel the vibrations throughout the TD Garden when he would work out. Like, it's the last guy I want to make mad.
Quick break. Today's show is brought to you by BetOnline.ag. NBA season's over. We all know this. We're the deadest of dead times in the NBA, but it does not mean you cannot make money on basketball right now. You can already bet on who's going to win the 2020 title. Looking at the odds right now, Clippers plus 350. Get Kawhi, get Paul George, you get the top billing for sure. Lakers plus 400, Bucks plus 500, Rockets plus 800, Philly plus 900. If you keep looking, though, you'll find the Celtics eventually at a plus 1600. That's not the best bet. I think plus 1600, the odds of you hitting that are astronomical. But Celtics odds to win the division, plus 300. Not the worst idea I've ever heard in my entire life, right? I think that's a safe bet. You can also make custom player bets during games. Like, who lets you do that? You can just pick a player and a stat, and BetOnline.ag will give you a line for it. And then you can, there's player props as well. Zion Williams' points are set at 18.5, over under that. Plus, NFL season is coming, folks. Super Bowl odds are out. The Patriots plus 600. Look, I think they have defense to keep their offense in games. Brady is a really smart quarterback. They have a really smart offensive coordinator. It makes a lot of sense to me. Whether it's to you or not, I don't know, but I love the Patriots at plus 600. Maybe you do too. Regardless, just make sure you go to clnsmedia.com/CelticsBeat to get a 50% bonus. It's 50 on your deposit of at least $25 more when you sign up and use the promo code CLNS50. Whatever you do, make sure you use betonline.ag. Use the promo code CLNS50 for a 50% bonus on your first deposit of at least $25. Go to clnsmedia.com/CelticsBeat. That promo code CLNS50. Please see BetOnline's general rules for additional terms and conditions regarding bonuses. Back to Chris.
You mentioned a little bit, and you did some deep dive on this, and kudos to you because, I don't know if people understand how hard it is. Not hard it is, but, how monotonous it is and how, unbearably boring this is to go back and, transcribe quotes. Folks, if you want to understand how hard this is and how frustrating it can be, just go put out a 2-minute song and play it and just keep, write down the lyrics to it, right? This is what you went back out the entire season from the beginning of the season up to, December, where there's that Dinwiddie, oh yeah, Kyrie reached out to me, and you went through all of Kyrie's quotes. You did this. I don't know what made you want to do this and what you want to put yourself through this type of torture, but you did this. So, I looked through all of them. What did you come to, what sort of conclusion did you come to going through all of these quotes?
So the impetus was that I right when Dinwiddie said, and I think it was on the Athletic podcast, that Kyrie had reached out to him and sort of inquired about what it was like to play in Brooklyn. And then he sort of alluded that it was before Dinwiddie signed his extension with the Nets. So, first off, that was December 13th, I believe. And so I'm sitting there, doing the math in my head. I'm thinking, all right, so October 4th, Kyrie comes out in front of season ticket holders and says, if you'll have me back, I plan to resign here. He spends the next couple of weeks kind of basking in the afterglow and talking up Boston. And he films that Nike commercial that debuts in late November. And yet by December, early December, he's now got a wandering eye and wants to see what else is out there. And so I just kind of went back in my notebook, and now you just talked me up and made me sound really good. But luckily, I think a lot of us do this where we stash, every quote from games, and it's kind of easy to go back. And I just kind of tried to find every quote I had from Kyrie in that stretch. And I thought it was fascinating just sort of as I was reading through, because I was curious if anything would jump out. I think what stood out to me most was that really through much of October, he was really positive. And so certainly they didn't play well. And by November, he was frustrated, especially when you think about they were 9-9 and 10-10, I think. And they had some bad losses in there, to the Magic and the Knicks. And you could tell that he was getting frustrated. And there was a couple instances where he pointed the finger at the young guys. And so you could definitely see the cracks. But then they also ripped off this, pretty good winning streak after starting 10-10. And it felt things were getting better. And so my big takeaways were, it was obvious, early on he was frustrated, and maybe that started to give him the freedom to start looking around and wondering what else was out there, and whether he made the right decision to sort of say that he'd be back in Boston. And that, too, he really did ride the emotional roller coaster. Like, he was really positive when they played well. He was really negative when they didn't. And I just got the sense that, that's why the Celtics probably never gave up hope that he would be back, because they just probably felt like if they ever put it together, if they ever went on a playoff run, then they had a very good chance to bring him back, or if they made the right moves. And so I can understand why, people keep saying to me, well, if you're so disenchanted, why didn't they just move him by February? I don't think it was that easy. Like, they just sort of held out hope that they would always figure it out. And that was from top to bottom. Like, that's why you don't move Terry Rozier at the deadline, because you just think eventually you're gonna make this thing work. And ultimately they never did. But it was just, I just thought it was fascinating. I still can't imagine that, if you go back and you did this season over 100 times, I wonder how many times the Celtics start 15-5 instead of 10-10, and I wonder how different it all plays out if that happens. Like, guys don't get frustrated, and guys play freer, and does Gordon Hayward figure it out quicker? Does Kyrie enjoy his time more, and is he more engaged? I don't know. It'd be fascinating to know in an alternate world if how this all would have played out if they didn't have that just awful start.
Well, I don't need to be this guy, but, like, I'm going to bring this up in two different instances. One, like, how different is the season look if they start 15-5? That's a great question. How much different does the season look, and that start look, if Kyrie's in shape? Like, one of the big things that I remember from the beginning part of the season and watching Kyrie, it looked like he was in shape. It didn't. He had the long hair with the headband. It looked like he'd been, like, hanging out on a beach somewhere or hanging out in the woods somewhere. And he came back, and he wasn't really the guy that I think we all expected to come back right from the beginning. Like, I know he had the surgery, and he hadn't played for a while, and he had some stuff to go through. And I get that. But when you have the surgery he had, and look, we had the most comprehensive stuff you could have on Kyrie's surgery. We had Dr. P from I think he works for either DraftKings now, as in addition to working with Duke University, Dr. Celine Perec, where we had him on explain like all the things that could be going wrong with Kyrie's knee. We mentioned it, we detailed it. He's like, yeah, he's going to need stuff in the offseason. He's got that scoped out, blah, 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 whatever. But, he eventually will come back and should be fine. It's not like something we have to be totally concerned about. And you look at the start that Kyrie got off to, he had 7 points in the first game that they played. He was 2 of 14 from the field, 1 of 8 from three-point range. Against Toronto the next game, 10 for 20. Then he was 5 for 16. He was 6 of 13 in Game 5 against Oklahoma City. He took 5 shots against Detroit. He wasn't in shape for the first month plus of that season. You get into November, then he starts to play himself into shape. So some of that has to be on Kyrie. And the flip side, the end of the season, well, let's also be honest here. Kyrie, like, whether he quit or not, he did not play well against Milwaukee. Like, he just played terribly. 4 of 18, 18 of 22, 7 of 22, 6 of 21. Those are his numbers from the 4 losses, and he says he has to shoot more. He has to take more shots. Like, he was a huge, like, I'm not trying to dump on Kyrie as much, because we've all taken turns doing that. But at some point, the why of, like, what happened here, like, why did you sour on this team that had just gone to an Eastern Conference Finals the year before that without you, with young guys? Why did you sour on Danny Ainge? Why did you sour on Brad Stevens, who everybody seems to love playing for? Like, there has to be a why, Chris, and we haven't heard that yet, because Kyrie, as of this taping, still hasn't done his press conference in Brooklyn. Like, what is going on here?
Yeah, well, first off, I don't think he's going to do a press conference until the start of the season or start of training camp, so I think we're just going to end up waiting.
Are you going to that, by the way? Are you going to that? Are you going to go to that? Somebody from your station's got to go to that, right?
Oh, for sure. Me and Sherrod will be down there, so I'm certain of it. It'll be a big deal. I think back to when he first came here, though, and, Jeff Goodman, as you were mentioning, kind of peppered him a little bit about why he wanted out of Cleveland. And I remember he was very, standoffish about that and didn't get off to a great start in that regards. And yet, invariably he's going to have to discuss it. And, he's the type that doesn't really want to go down that road, but he's going to have to. And maybe we'll get some hints then. But, yeah, until then, we're left to sort of ponder it all. Like, I mean, you mentioned the knee surgery. let's remember, Ev, he was still recovering from the nose surgery that kept him off the sideline for Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals in 2018 when he didn't accompany his team to watch that game. A lot of fascinating things. It's a unique, a lot of people let him off the hook for that too, but from all accounts, it was because he had it felt like it because he had the media tour for Uncle Drew coming up. And I know these things are scheduled in advance, and maybe the Celtics honestly didn't think that that they would be playing until Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals, and yet I just feel like they probably could have moved that if they wanted to. Kyrie's just an interesting dude, and I will say, the Celtics have really taken the high road in the aftermath here, and from Wick Grossbeck on the radio saying all polite things about Kyrie and how they were texting each other recently, and Danny really, thanking Kyrie for his time here, but sort of admitting that he knew that by March that he was gone, and it's just a fascinating tale, and maybe we'll get more answers. Maybe it really is just as simple as he was frustrated and it was time to move on. But you're right. I remember Tommy Heinsohn sort of saying on air that Kyrie looked 5 pounds too heavy, and certainly that contributed to the slow start. And then Kyrie found motivation in it, and it's just so funny how that whole season played out and all the little stuff that bubbled up.
Yeah, I remember this is my in a world full of hot takes right now. One of my favorites was Nick Wright of everybody's favorite hot take artist right now on Fox Sports 1, talking about how Danny and Wick, I think it was primarily Danny during the press conference for Kemba, took the high road when people would mention Kyrie's name. He's like, look, we're excited that Kemba's here. Kyrie had his time here. It's unfortunate it didn't work out, but we're happy that Kemba's here. Blah blah blah. And Nick Wright did this thing where I don't even know how he made this connection, but he did this thing where he was like, well, that's just that puts more blame on Danny and Brad because they won't publicly slam Kyrie at this press conference. And I'm like, why in the world would they slam Kyrie at this conference when they're here to introduce the new guys? It'd look foolish if they're like, yeah, Kyrie's problem with this and this and that, when the new guy, it's like complaining about an ex-girlfriend, and her problems when you're introducing your new girlfriend to your buddies, right? That would be the equivalent here. How would she feel? Probably terrible. You don't want to ruin this friendship with Kyrie already, with Kemba already. This is brand new, and Kemba, from all reports, is and again, we got to, back I was in college, got to do a little bit with Kemba Walker, and being around the Big East at that time, nobody, and I can tell you, literally nobody has any bad words to say about Kemba Walker in any of his stops anywhere in college or anywhere in the pros. A whole different animal here. But with Kyrie, it's why would they publicly trash Kyrie at this press conference, introducing Enes Kanter and Kemba Walker, his replacement? It just felt out of whack, and it felt like the hottest take I've seen in a long time in a really weird place. And again, it symbols to me that we again are here in the deadest time of the offseason, and the whole LeBron is a bad dad thing, that's where we're at now. We are at this juncture of the offseason where we're debating whether LeBron is a good dad or not, and it's absolutely driving me insane at this point, Chris. But to get back to Danny a little bit, because they mentioned we knew about around March that Kyrie was probably not coming back, and that's a shame because the trade deadline is in February. Was there any sort of did you feel personally, I'm not talking about what people wrote and read about, but did you ever feel personally in February that if Kyrie's gone, it might behoove Danny to move Kyrie right now to get something for him, or do you think Danny was like, you know what, screw this, we have Kyrie, I'd rather have Kyrie here as a guy that could maybe take us to the next level, maybe in the playoffs, and then leave afterwards? I mean, I know Danny is kind of a shrewd guy. I mean, we saw that with Isaiah in that trade. But at some point, if Danny knew this wasn't going to happen, we'd start to look at him as a GM that maybe doesn't take as many risks as he should. I mean, I'm trying to figure out what Danny's mindset is here.
Yeah, no, I think again, the exercise of going back taught me that Kyrie rode the emotional roller coaster as much as anybody, and I feel maybe the Celtics as a whole did too. They go on that winning streaks, and everyone starts saying, okay, he's happy, we can convince him to stay, and then things go south, and they're like, oh man, he's probably going to leave. And so I do think that ultimately, the plan A, and Danny was like, Danny chose his words carefully here. Plan A after the draft, and once they knew they were going to have cap space, was Kemba and Enes Kanter. But Plan A for most of last season was get to the off season, re-sign Kyrie, go get Anthony Davis, and figure it out from there. And so I think they, even amid all the strife of last season, they sort of in the back of their mind sort of said, like, a lot of this will be alleviated because the roster's going to turn over. You bring in Anthony Davis, all of a sudden you've got your own little super duo or super team, really, with the pieces that they would have still had. And I think they were just confident that would have changed a lot of what ailed last year's team. And again, they just thought eventually it would click. And I'm sure they were sitting there through that Pacers series and through game one of the Bucks thinking the same thing, like, all right, maybe they finally found it. And, they didn't. And they were what they were by the end. But I don't begrudge Danny. Like, I can't sit here and as armchair general manager and say he should have been more aggressive. I don't know what you even get for Kyrie Irving at the trade deadline. I think it would have been hard for them to pull the trigger on that. And again, I don't think they were motivated to do it at that point. I think they were really convinced that this team would figure it out and that the playoffs would bring out the best in them. And for a small stretch, it did. But no, I don't think Danny should catch much grief for that.
Well, you have another opportunity here with Danny in an interesting contract situation this upcoming season with Jaylen Brown. And we all kind of know this is coming, and we're all sitting here waiting for the quote-unquote leap that he might make this year as he heads towards restricted free agency. But to dial it back a minute, I remember I got a lot of flack on Twitter from people that aren't Celtics fans, but I value their opinions because, it's hard sometimes with the green color glasses on to maybe make a totally logical decision, because again, I love Jaylen Brown. The only draft I got to cover was that draft with Jaylen Brown in it, and I got to ask Jaylen a question, and he answered my question, which was, like, for me as a young reporter, like, the coolest thing ever. But, like, I love Jaylen Brown. I'm a big fan of his, and when the reports came out that San Antonio would have traded Kawhi to Boston for Jaylen Brown, a lot of people that aren't Celtics fans that don't watch Jaylen Brown every day are like, why didn't the C's do this? Are you one of those people, Chris?
And the first thing is, like, I've heard different things about whether, like, I don't even know how far, if there was conversations. To me, it doesn't sound like it was just that. I think San Antonio wanted an established player in return, and I don't know. It just doesn't add up to me that Jaylen plus whatever pick they would have thrown in, whether that's the Sacramento pick or something lesser. Certainly hindsight is 20/20, and I think more so because of the Sacramento pick plummeting in value based on the way the Kings played. People are frustrated that they weren't more aggressive in that pursuit. I just don't get the sense that it ever got to a stage where it was something like anyone would have considered or whatnot. So, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there was more smoke there, and the Celtics had a chance. But I think what people forget is, everyone was sitting there at that moment saying, why is Kawhi want out of San Antonio? Like, no one wants out of San Antonio. Why did it go wrong? And he just came off season in which he played 9 games, and everyone was like, is he going to be healthy? Certainly, again, with hindsight, you sit there and say, well, geez, he was one of the best players in the NBA. He was an absolute assassin in the playoffs, and ultimately brought his team a championship. And you're frustrated that you didn't push harder to get that player. I just think it's easy to sit back now and wonder if they should have been more aggressive. But what I do think it tells you, and I've sort of maintained this in the aftermath, is that, I do think, Danny and probably 28 other general managers sit there now and say, the league's changing and windows are shorter and the ability to go get impact players is more difficult. When you have the opportunity, you have to be ultra aggressive. And so, if that situation, happened again right now, do I think the Celtics might be a little bit more aggressive? Would they maybe be willing to push more, maybe take on a little bit more risk? I think absolutely. I think, you still balance it all and you're still careful about, overcommitting what you have. But, let's remember too, they're just coming off that 2018 run and they felt pretty good about what adding Kyrie and Gordon was going to do. It didn't work out, but I don't, that's another instance where I don't fault them. I do fault them a little bit for not making a move at the deadline this past year. it did, like, by that point, it was clear that the mix wasn't working, that there were just too many guys. And I understand, like, because of the Anthony Davis pursuit, their hands were a little bit tied, like, in terms of you didn't want to sacrifice assets. But I just feel like maybe there was a little move they could have done. And, you know, I don't know if that would have changed the path at all. But yeah, that's the only part in the last probably 18 months that I sit there and go, they missed an opportunity. Like, you know, that maybe they could have tried something.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll say to the people, because I agree with a lot you said about the, you know, not trading Jaylen for Kawhi thing, because again, you don't even know what you're getting. Like, none of us knew. I mean, it's easier to sit here and say after you won an NBA title, like, yeah, you know, Kawhi was great, like, but nobody knew at the time. There was no. And, like, Uncle Dennis controls everything in terms of information going out anyway, and you have no idea his health status. He hadn't played in forever. He didn't know, and it's not like he's totally healthy either. Like, in the NBA Finals, he looked hurt. Like, in the playoffs, he looked hurt. Now, like, he's so good that it doesn't even matter. He can play on one leg and still win an NBA title, though he needs help from Fred VanVleet and Kyle Lowry and Marc Gasol a little bit, and Serge Ibaka going off for a while. Like, he needs help. OG Anunoby, but Pascal Siakam, another one of those guys he need help from. But, like, you know, it's easy to say that now. And I also will throw this out there. Like, you don't draft in the top 3, like, 3 years in a row and hope to get a small window out of an opportunity. Like, if you get Kawhi and he comes in and you win a title and he bolts, like, cool. If you're Toronto and has never won a title before.
Right.
But if you're Boston and you leveraged your veterans to get these draft picks down the road that panned out, you got 2 top 3 draft picks in a row with Jaylen and Jason. Like, your idea here is, I'm not contending for one time. I'm trying to contend for multiple years. Like, and the way things look to back up you up. Like, they went to the Eastern Conference Finals and were a really terrible shooting, you know, half away from taking down LeBron and going to the NBA Finals and probably getting their ass kicked against Golden State. But with 2 young guys and Al Horford being the linchpins for everything. And you want to, like, disrupt that and disturb that to get Kawhi for a year and have him bolt somewhere else? Like, that's not what it's about. Now, maybe with Kyrie in the fold and maybe, you know, Kyrie and Kawhi and Al, they figure it out and they stay. But the other flip side of that is you get 1 title, Kyrie bolts, Kawhi bolts, Al bolts, and now you have literally nothing. You have Jason Tatum and nothing. So, and I get the people that are like, yeah, well, an NBA title is what you want. But, yeah, if you're, you know, the Toronto Raptors and you never won a title before, or if you're the LA Clippers and you've been irrelevant for your entire existence, yes. But when you're the Lakers or the Celtics and some of the teams and the Spurs that have been, you know, some of these, and Spurs recently, you know, these perennial teams have been, you know, dynamic forces in the league for so long, like, you don't want 1 year, you want several. And Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum is still the best way to do that. And with that being said, this whole Jaylen Brown extension is going to be really interesting because there aren't a lot of free agents coming up this offseason. There just aren't. And he's going to be one of the top ones if he takes a little bit of a leap here. And what happens down the road here is going to be interesting. Now, I'll say this. I think what happened this past offseason with all these sign-and trades make it easier for Dane to kick their can down the road a little bit further. Like in the past, where you'd have to trade one of these restricted free agents if you had no plans on re-signing them, you have to trade them in February. Now, with all because everybody was doing sign-and trades. With the addition of all these sign-and trades now, you can kick that can down the road till the end of the season to figure out what you want to do. Look at his market and say, yes, we want to do this, or no, we don't want to do this. In terms of Jaylen Brown, what would you need to see, Chris, to say, yes, this is the guy we want to invest some money in?
Yeah, I guess it comes down to the number too, right? Like, if you're talking, what do I need to see to give him max money? Like, you know, you need to see a real pronounced leap and a guy who's ready to be, you know, one of your top 2-3 guys. And, you know, I don't rule out that Jaylen has that in him based on the way he's performed in the postseason the last 2 years. And yet, you know, there's clearly this year in terms of consistency and, you know, what he can do. But, you know, at a lower number, I really like the player. And I think I understand why he's probably not interested in an extension right now because he's not going to get anywhere near the money that he believes he can earn. And if he goes out there and has a really good year and with this with this rotation giving more freedom now to probably the younger guys, there's a real opportunity here for him to assert himself. And I get it from the Celtics perspective as well. Like, they got to be careful. You can't overcommit your money. Part of it too is you got to start looking towards that 2021 summer where we're going to go through this again, and there's going to be tons of top name free agents out there. Maybe Giannis, maybe Kawhi again. Like, you got to stay in that game, and I think that was part of their hesitation with going long term with Al Horford, because you just had to maintain that flexibility and be in the game when the opportunity arose. So I think it's good for both sides though, because the Celtics will still have the right of first refusal, and they can bring him back. It might cost them a little bit more, but if you have to pay a little bit more because Jaylen Brown goes out and has a really good year this year, not the worst problem to have. And certainly with Tatum coming due soon after, it's a balance, and you don't want to overpay to keep your young core intact. But that being said, if they show that these are the guys you can build around, and if they show they mesh well with Kemba and Gordon and the other players that are sort of part of your core right now, then it's a little bit easier to spend that money. So I'd be very surprised if anything got done before opening night. It just seems highly unlikely to me for both sides, and the Celtics just haven't really been, the type of team to go overspend to keep guys. They're always pretty fair, I think, with what they offer guys. And, in the instances of like Marcus Smart, you saw that, he bet on himself and then got to restricted free agency, and like they sort of gave him just a little bit more than what they had offered the summer before. So it's on Jaylen to prove his value, and I think that's good for the Celtics for him to have that motivation.
And like the last thing I'll say here in terms of like Jaylen Brown stuff, you're seeing a little bit like some of these young guys. Like there just came out the piece. I think it was on ESPN that just came out about how Jason Tatum might have had a little bit of influence in Kemba Walker coming to Boston because they went to Paris together with Jordan Brand, and Kemba could pick Tatum's brain about a couple of things. It's actually really awesome that some of the young guys might have a little bit of influence here. Like Tatum, obviously with his Jordan Brand connections, is great. But like we all kind of forget that Jaylen Brown is kind of involved with the players union a little bit, and is going to be like the president of the players union someday. I think at some whether it's president, vice president, treasurer, or whatever the hell he needs to be, some sort of leadership involvement with the players union. I think that's a huge positive thing that they have two young guys, young 20s, who are trying to get involved in multiple layers of being an NBA player, whether it's enhancing the brand via shoe deals and traveling to here and here and here for this sort of endorsement and this sort of thing that they have to do for joy. Or if you're Jaylen Brown, like going on behalf of your fellow peers to at the next CBA to help bargain things. Like I think it's important. I think it's often forgotten about with Jaylen that he is a guy that at a young age was like this. I think it's a lot to do with the people he keeps around him. Like we all heard when he was drafted, that Isaiah Thomas, the older Isaiah Thomas, Detroit Pistons Isaiah Thomas, was one of his advisors in helping him along, and he didn't have an agent and all this stuff. Like I think it's important to keep in mind with him that, is he going to be a recruiter? Maybe, maybe not. We'll see with Team USA and see how this works out with the Celtics basically dominating Team USA at this point, and even the guys like Landry Shamet aren't gonna be there. But like having young guys that can make somewhat of an impact at a big stage, whether it's with Team USA or all these other things, like I think it's valuable to Boston, who's looking to, obviously, down the road, maybe bring guys and attract guys to a market that, quote-unquote, can attract star free agents, right?
Right, and so, I think Kemba alluded to it in the aftermath of his press conference where he said that he had sort of, not only with Tatum in Paris for the Jordan Brand, but I think he was overseas with Jaylen Brown the previous year, and they had both left an impression on him. And I get it. Like, we sit here watching Kyrie and Al walk away, and naturally we say, why don't they want to play with this young core? Is that a reflection of what Al thought the potential of the Celtics was in their future? And I don't know. I think there's a lot of factors that play for both of those guys. And so I do feel like those guys have some pull around the league. And it's interesting to hear a guy like Kemba say that he trusted their sort of their advice and what they have building here in Boston, and certainly when Kyrie first got here, again I'm going back to that article, when we asked him, you're staying, is part of the reason you want to stay because of the young core here, And he said that was like a huge factor. And so, listen, we know how it all played out and all the young guy talk and all that during the year. But, I think players do look at Boston and say, there's some intriguing young talent here. And like I throw Marcus Smart's only 25. Like they've got guys that can grow and develop here, as we'll see at Team USA with 3 of those 4 guys, and then you throw Kemba in there. So I just feel like that's a really nice thing for the Celtics to be able to say, hey, look, we're competitive. The more pieces we add, the better we can be. And that resonates with star players in this league. So Team Shamrock's got to get their recruiting business cards out while they're out there in Vegas next week.
Ditto. Last question here. And this is like sort of breaking news. We're recording this on Friday, full disclosure. Some news happened today. Selfishly, Chris, how angry are you that we're not getting Nets Celtics on Christmas Day and we're getting Celtics Raptors instead? Because I'm like super upset about it because the ratings for that would have killed. They would have killed. It would have been amazing.
Yeah, selfishly, I'm happy we get potential Kyrie visit, if he comes on the night before Thanksgiving, so we don't have to wait quite as long as to Christmas to get that matchup.
You think we'll get another F Thanksgiving quote from him? Because that'd be another incredible time.
I'm sure it's gonna, he'll have some statement after that game for sure. If he comes, the Celtics played Cleveland, felt like a bunch, not only in the regular season but in the preseason. I think Kyrie made one trip that opening night, and the night Gordon Hayward got hurt. So. Will he want to come here and face the Boston media and answer those questions again? My guess is on a marquee game he'll want to, but maybe the first time, and then maybe we won't see him again. But I am disappointed for Christmas. I just thought that was really an obvious matchup for the league. I thought it would have been neat to see Kyrie come to Boston on the big stage. Even if it was that first game of the day, it would have really set the tone for the Christmas slate. And no disrespect to Toronto, but without Kawhi Leonard, and I know they're the world champs, and that probably helps get them on national TV on a big stage like this. But, to have to go to Toronto on Christmas, I'm having a hard time getting excited about it.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but, I don't know. Maybe something will happen. Maybe there'll be an interesting team early in the year, and they'll have more juice by then, but no Philly, no Milwaukee. I could have thought of I don't know. I guess on Christmas, we want to be able to spend time with the family, enjoy that. No one wants to be all sitting there being hostile about Kyrie. Maybe it's better to get it out of the way.
Maybe do us a favor by having not on TV, so families don't fight about Kyrie and yell at the TV for a long time. NBC Sports Boston's Chris Forsberg. Chris, you're the best. I appreciate the time, man. Look, we have some dead time. Enjoy yourself. Are you on vacation? Is there a vacation coming up at some point for you? I know this is the time where people do it.
I'm disappearing a little bit in August to go play go down to Myrtle Beach, where my family's got some property, and we'll relax with the family, delete Twitter for a couple weeks, and get back at it when things start getting interesting again.
Absolutely, man. Enjoy yourself. You and everybody else at NBC Sports Boston definitely have earned it, especially this past season and all the stuff you had to deal with. Congratulations on all your success. We'll talk soon, Chris, okay?
All right. Thank you, brother. Talk soon.
And that will do it for this episode of Celtics Beat here on CLNS Media, the leading online provider of audio video coverage of your Boston.
I guess on Christmas, we want to be able to spend time with the family, enjoy that. No one wants to be all sitting there being hostile about Kyrie. Maybe it's better to get it out of the way.
Maybe do us a favor by having not on TV, so families don't fight about Kyrie and yell at the TV for a long time. NBC Sports Boston's Chris Forsberg. Chris, you're the best. I appreciate the time, man. Look, we have some dead time. Enjoy yourself. Are you on vacation? Is there a vacation coming up at some point for you? I know this is the time where people do it.
I guess on Christmas, we want to be able to spend time with the family, enjoy that. No one wants to be all sitting there being hostile about Kyrie. Maybe it's better to get it out of the way.
Maybe do us a favor by having not on TV, so families don't fight about Kyrie and yell at the TV for a long time. NBC Sports Boston's Chris Forsberg. Chris, you're the best. I appreciate the time, man. Look, we have some dead time. Enjoy yourself. Are you on vacation? Is there a vacation coming up at some point for you? I know this is the time where people do it.
I'm disappearing a little bit in August to go play go down to Myrtle Beach, where my family's got some property, and we'll relax with the family, delete Twitter for a couple weeks, and get back at it when things start getting interesting again.